So they contacted Basil to obtain permission to seize the DVR as evidence.
Okay, so what we want to do is just take a look at that and just make sure there's nothing suspicious on there.
What are the windows actually?
Oh, there's two right in the area where she was found. You don't mind if we take it and take a look though?
So I don't know.
We'll get it back to you as soon as we can.
I mean, I guess I don't have any issue.
Okay. Alright, I appreciate it.
Once they got a look at the surveillance video, the police see Nada fall. But there was some disappointment.
Yo, Danny.
It's grainy, a little bit inconsistent, and there is no footage of the actual
it's
window
out
itself.
now. I don't know why.
But there
The
is
stupid thing
a
just messed up, I guess.
wall outside the window, and there is a shadow being cast on the wall.
They could see a lot of movement. What is this all about?
Investigators will submit that for data review and enhancement. It takes a period of time.
The police came, brought the pictures from the primary scene, which showed that it was staged in a fast way without much thinking.
This photo is of the inside of the room. This is the window Nada fell from. Here's the screen that had been removed from the window, a bucket with water, and the step ladder with cleaning solution is on top of the ladder. The cleaning solution that the police found on top of the ladder was Tilex. Tilex is a product used generally to clean a bathroom. The children say Nada normally cleaned the house in the morning, and someone who cleans all the time would know that Tilex is not used to clean windows, and that was definitely a red flag for the investigators. Investigators knew that Basil and Nada were in the middle of a contentious divorce, so they looked further into his background. Basil had more than one criminal conviction on his record at the time of Nada's death.
Basil was a medical doctor, and he was charged with and pled guilty to reduced charges of medical and insurance fraud.
He was stealing money from people, saying that they needed an x-ray when they did it and charging them for an x-ray. And they would take his word for it, because if the doctor's telling you you need an x-ray, what are you going to do? You're going to get an x-ray. It was either he faces some sort of jail time or he pays $350,000 and he's good to go. So he walks downstairs after the court hearing, writes them a check, and walks out.
Nada had been his bookkeeper, and at some point she said that he blamed her for his crimes, and that was all a setup. Everything was blamed on Nada.
There were several domestic incidents between my mother and my father. One where he pushed her down the stairs and dragged her across the tile. I was screaming at him, I was crying, I was hitting him, trying to get him to let her go.
Like, turn around. This camera is so
I would
bad.
talk to Nada in the locker rooms at the club. She talked about her fear of him and how she thought he was a dangerous man.
During the course of the investigation, Nada's cell phone was collected as evidence. Nada and Basil had limited communication, so police focused on the text messages between Nada and her son, Muhammad, who was still talking to his father, Basil. When examining the text messages between Nada and Muhammad, the police discovered what they considered a bombshell. As part of the divorce, Nada's attorneys were asking for information on Basil regarding tax evasion and other criminal activity which could potentially land him in prison.
Nada had been in my office on a Friday, and we had been preparing For the
Wait.
deposition, it was supposed to be held the next week.
Alright, game.
Now they would have been cross-examined by Vassal's attorney, and I would have had a chance to cross-examine Vassal. Monday morning, I was back at my office, and I received a phone call from a friend of Nava's saying Nava had clear-headed and got it.
Just skip into the only actually
Timing of her death is very curious. Just a week or two before giving her testimony for the deposition in a contentious divorce.
That gave what could be even more motive for Nada's murder. And then police learned information about criminal activity on Vassal that wasn't regarding tax evasion. Vassal had pled guilty to spouse abuse, and he was required to wear a tether. A tether is an electronic monitoring device that shows a person's location. It's worn around the ankle, and the tether can be examined to determine where that person has been. Based on the examination of the tether records, it showed that Vassal was actually 20 miles away in Canton. So Vassal was not at the home the morning Nada was pushed out the window. So the big question for investigators was, if it wasn't Vassal, then who was it who killed Nada that morning and pushed her out the window?
Vassal was ruled out as a suspect in this case because they knew where he was. He wore a GPS tether on his ankle. He wasn't at that house. So who could have done this?
One of the advantages in today's world is the ability to take film and have it digitally enhanced, and the potential for precise information can sometimes be acquired. Farmington Police Department finally received the enhanced video.
At 5:54 a.m., the light comes on in the room where Nada fell from the window, and you can see two shadows that are cast on the wall outside. It then shows the one person being hoisted over the ledge of the window and falling out. After the body falls out the window, you see the shadow of the person still in the room, moving objects around, which shows that the scene had been staged.
One of the things the investigators did, they met with Aya at the athletic club. Were not awarded.
I took them to Franklin Athletic Club. They went through her locker.
There was nothing of evidentiary value from the items removed from the locker, but Aya was very forthcoming and expressed her concern and her view of the relationship between both her mother and father and Muhammad, her older brother, who was aligned more with his father.
Muhammad's reaction to my parents getting divorced was saying to my mom, "How could you? Or you're going to destroy our lives." My brother basically would reiterate everything my dad had ever said. I told my mom, "You guys are getting a divorce and there's going to be a custody agreement. My brother's going to go and live with my dad, obviously, because that's what he wants. But, like, we don't know when that's going to happen, and I genuinely don't feel safe living with my brother. He's a lot more volatile, and his fuse is so much shorter, and you just don't know when, like, he's going to snap." When I was talking to the police, I was starting to remember things that I didn't remember just because of the shock of everything was happening. My brother chronically wakes up late. Like, there's never a day where he's early to anything.
That morning, he had already gotten up, showered, cleaned up, and that was not the norm for him to be up and ready before anyone else. I have further stated that her brother was not reacting in an urgent sense. She identified that her mom had fallen, was outside on the patio, appeared to be lifeless, and needed urgent help, and he was not running behind her.
He's just staring at the floor, walking out of the bathroom very, very slowly, looking very dazed and like confused. And I remember thinking in the back of my head, okay, that's weird.
The morning of the incident, investigators requested Dawson would come and take the kids away from the house so that they could process the entire crime scene. As the Vassal and Muhammad went into a room, closed the door, and excluded her from any conversation or discussion. Furthermore, as a result of the crime scene examination, investigators discovered in the laundry area jeans, a rug, some other items in a tank of water, and with an air cover. But Aya had said that only she or her mother, Nana, ever did laundry, and neither of them had done laundry that day.
Investigators found it very strange, but solving a case depends on whether or not all of the boxes are checked. So you do go back to the basics, the who, the what, when, where, how, why. The 911 call comes in.
Well, we're going to do the detail now, okay?
The dispatcher is talking to Muhammad, directing him on how to perform CPR on his mother, and she encourages him to speed up.
Just pick up the pace. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Muhammad did not appear to be vigorously trying to apply those techniques to resuscitate his mother. Aya was concerned, hysterical, upset, yet Muhammad never seemed to be quite as alarmed by the situation. All of that led investigators to further examination of the digital video. Once the body of Nada is out the window, the remaining structure appears to be a male, matching Muhammad's size and weight.
Now investigators focused on Muhammad as a suspect, and they went out to the house immediately to find out what really happened.
When police are investigating the murder, the first thing they do is start to rule people out. Basil, the husband, was ruled out as a suspect in this case. The only people in the house when police arrive are the kids.
Investigators requested permission to talk to Muhammad and wanted to take Muhammad down to the police station for interviews. He declined. He said he preferred the interviews be done at the house. Having done thousands of interviews in my career, it's often best to start softly, give an individual an opportunity to develop rapport, and let them offer their initial ideas.
Do you run the long ball?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty normal. The only time we have had issues, you could say, is at the beginning of the first visit, but that's it.
Okay, what time did you get up Sunday morning?
I got up around 6 o'clock, and 6:05 I got into the shower.
And then what?
Then around 6:30, that's when my sister yelled. She's like, Mom fell. And then I'm like, what? I'm like, she fell. I called the cops already. And we went across all around the house. She gave me the phone. So I shot my out again.
Now we noticed that, there's a security system that works.
No, I was like, more cameras.
Well, we could report things on video as to what transpired. So we're trying to find out anything that you want to say about that, or
Muhammad was reluctant to provide further detail and was somewhat evasive with investigators at that time.
trying to figure out what happened, why happened. Because watching the videos, nobody leaves the house. It's an accident, it's an argument, that's what we need to know. How your mother ended up falling out the window.
I mean, is there any specific question you can ask me?
How did she go fall out the window?
I don't know.
The interview of Muhammad was skillfully performed by asking basic questions, allowing him to elaborate and explain how this accident occurred.
You're telling me right now that you wanted to and didn't help them clean the windows or hold the ladder or anything like that. It was an accident happened. And it's a perfect thing. If you like any other teenage kid, I'm sure you're in there, you'd like to help me do something. Is that something that could happen?
Yeah. Yeah, I just woke up and I was really pay attention to anything, so
Is that what happened? That's what we're trying to figure out.
maybe, I don't know.
The investigators were plenty of them an opportunity to clarify, but trying to drill down into what's actually true.
Do you recall if you were helping her or not?
No, I saw her walking upstairs and some stuff, and she said to go get a spray bottle, and then I brought her that, and then that's it, I love it.
Now you remember the first spray bottle for her and being in the room, so what was going on?
I went to open the window, and then she had a pot, and a bucket or whatever, and so I brought her the spray bottle, for the window cleaner. I went back to my room to take a shower. That's it.
If you have nothing to hide, if it was sincerely an accident, you are going to tell investigators that you were in the room. You would tell the truth. But if it was not an accident, then there is a lot to hide.
It's still an accident if you're looking at your cell phone and she slips.
No. Did you really want to say that?
And we're about 99.9% sure it's Mel that's in the video. If you're not being truthful with us now, it's hard to look back on that in the future and say, okay, it was an accident. You see what I'm saying? Muhammad, it's alright.
To my mom's wife, man.
Muhammad originally said that he was not in the room with Nada when she fell.
You know that somebody was in the room.
Okay, so when I woke up, she thought something in the window. So I had brought her the spray bottle, and she told me to, just be there so I can help her with the fire. Hold on, and I was shaking a little bit. She went up the ladder, and she tried to lean over. I was standing there, holding the ladder. And then she leaned over, and she said something got stuck on. I don't know what it was. And that's what she felt.
You're saying that she slipped while she was on the ladder. Somebody got caught where?
The turning handle. Okay. I looked down and I didn't want to. I didn't want to do it. I didn't know what to do. I was cleaning myself to my room immediately. I just wanted to forget about it. I just saw my fall off my
Yo, console.
Based on the fact that he
I'm
changed his
really
story
bad at
several
this.
times, and that there were
I
only
never do
a few
fixes.
people in the home at the time, police took Muhammad into custody after the interview.
As a result of that arrest, investigators confiscated the telephone that Muhammad had in his possession.
Police examined the cell phone records and saw that Muhammad had
Man, I'm
actually
not good at
sent
that.
his father a photo of the window Nada fell from,
3.
and he had
gosh,
sent
I'm
that
bad at
photo
this.
quite some time before her death.
Examination of that telephone also reflected the phone was actively used by Muhammad with his father the morning of the incident, either texting or telephone calls at 4:30 until approximately 6 a.m. This was a premeditated act by Muhammad, possibly in concert with others.
How much he been instructed by someone, I don't know because I was not there. But would it be the early morning hours while she was still asleep? It did not take very long to do
This
this
is-
surprise attack with placing the rag over the mouth and
Can I
nostrils.
skip this?
Where the towel soaked with some chemical that had anesthetic function, inhaling this directly, and was quickly over within a minute or two, three at the most. And then disposal
Okay,
of
this
the
is a
body
little key annoying,
followed
so I'm
through
just
the
gonna
window.
get on a different one.
That was it.
Destaging was done by Muhammad after his mother was out the window and things were put into place to make it appear that there was a cleaning process underway. Muhammad put the garments that he had on into the washing machine and did not know how to properly operate that machine, which is why they discovered these items in a tank of water.
Muhammad had very little respect for his mother. He knew that there was bad blood between his father and his mother, and he was much closer to his father. He blamed his mother for their divorce. He blamed her for his father being arrested and getting in trouble with the law.
When I found out how my mom died, it was a couple months after the incident, and I was getting texts from all these sorts of people, like saying I'm so sorry for your loss. I remember getting a text from this guy that I went to middle school with, and he was like, Aya, like, do you think your brother did it? I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He's like, do you not know, like, they're charging your brother with it? And I was like, what are you talking about? By then, I think at that point, I was already starting to, like, put the pieces together, but, like, to have it be something that existed outside of my mind was just a huge shock to me.
Muhammad went to trial in March of 2022, which was almost 5 years after he was arrested.
This was a woman who deserved justice. This was a woman who had been murdered senselessly. Her trial was important to us. We wanted to be a witness to justice.
This was a 7-day trial. The defense didn't have much to work with.
I am innocent. I didn't kill my mother in any of the contorted theories presented by prosecution over the last 5 years.
You are not the victim. You are done. Have a seat.
The jury reached a verdict in just 2 hours. Guilty as charged. Mohammed was sentenced to 35 to 60 years for killing his own mother. It's not life. He got lucky in that regard.
His mother, the one who raised him and worked hard for him and sacrificed her life and happiness for her children. In return, he throws her from the window to try to make it seem like she fell while she was cleaning. One night he was walking out, I said something to the effect of, have fun rotting in prison, hope you die there too. I didn't ask for anyone to kill my mother. I didn't ask for any of this to happen, but when this is the hand that I'm dealt with, I'm gonna deal with it. I'm gonna be graduating college a year early with honors this May. My mom, she always wanted me to become a lawyer, so I am planning on going to law school, but I think even if I were to not become a lawyer, if I were to do something else in my life, she would be proud of me as long as I was putting myself and my happiness before anything else. And as long as I was just doing what I can to smile the next day. I am extremely determined to make it happen. You see where the world
Bro,
takes me.
these things are so big. I can't get past them.
These blue jeans that had soaked up so much blood they had turned red.
What happened? Someone assaulted him. What was this?
There was a casing in the bed of the pickup truck.
Searching around the body, I see a gunshot
No.
on the right thigh.
You need to be diligent, detail-oriented. You don't know if the gunshot wound was at the hands of someone else, whether it was self-inflicted.
When we used to
shot having some sort of dispute with other individuals. It painted a very different picture of what may have taken place.
Started writing a letter right before he died, and it said, if you're reading this, I passed away, and then it stopped. William wasn't paranoid. Somebody was trying to kill him.
Tell me how I died.
You know, it's never exactly what they tell you it's going to be. I'm never sure what you got when you're saying it.
Yeah, you never know.
I was notified that there was a deceased person on scene at an apartment building on McDuffie on Youngstown's northeast side. All we knew was a vehicle was involved and there was a lot of blood at the scene. So driving through the scene, we have absolutely no idea what we're going to find when we get there, and that first impression is going to be important. When I work a possible homicide case, I work directly with the coroner's investigators who respond to the scene.
As a coroner investigator, we are the eyes and ears for the forensic pathologist.
Finally.
We gather all the facts of the case and provide them with that.
I just slapped it.
Yeah. The detectives look for either fingerprints or some evidence-based items. The phones, the blood, whereas coroner investigators were more focused on the body. Every body has a story, and we're the voice for the deceased. Upon walking up into the parking lot, we could see the truck into the fence line and the deceased hanging out of the passenger side seat with the door open. Searching around the body, I see a gunshot wound on the right thigh, and the handgun was underneath.
I remember there was so much blood that I thought he was wearing red pants. But it was actually stone-washed blue jeans that soaked up so much blood that we called the blood out from the red. Looks like there's still paint from the truck on it, actually.
The green.
Yeah. Looks like green paint from the bumper. It appears that the truck rolled
Let me
from
just
this
see how
way
long this is.
northbound into the fence.
From there, all the way
Fall
around
back
there, all the
path
way
of
through
knees
here.
and stuff.
Through there.
That's where we started
Through
picking
there.
up
Through
personal
there.
items of the victim.
Oh, God.
My immediate impression of the scene was there was a lot of leads on the ground. There's a lot of places for shell casings to disappear to. So we started to look for evidence and candidates for witnesses. We did locate some items about 15 feet to the rear of the vehicle. Those items included a set of keys, a cigarette lighter, a tire iron, and a small spot of blood on the ground.
And it kind of appeared that the truck had either coasted or was driven from that location to where it came to rest after striking the fence. We started looking around the scene, myself, other detectives, our crime scene unit officers, determined where the shell casings might be because spent shell casings can be linked back to whatever gun fired them, and that would provide great evidentiary value down the road.
I just happened to look in the back of the truck and noticed the casing. With the casing in the bed of the truck, I realized that our victim was outside of his vehicle to the rear and to the left of the vehicle. Because the casings in most modern semi-automatic handguns will eject to the right and usually forward in the shoot. This made me believe that whatever gunplay happened outside of the vehicle and before the engine. Although we had a gunshot wound with a weapon on the scene and a casing that matched the caliber of the weapon, we did not know for sure if that casing came from that gun, and we were still too early to determine if there were other actors in this incident. 5 corners investigators closely. His body was photographed and personal items from his pockets were removed and placed on the sheet next to the photograph. Among those things was a credit card with the name William Reeves.
The day that they had found William, I started getting a phone call on Snapchat and on Facebook, and it ended up being one of my friends, and she was crying and saying that William had been killed, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And she was like, they just found William at the apartment, and he had been shot. I was really upset to find him, and he was passed away. So it was a lot. I met William in 2007. That was high school. And we were at a party of a friend of ours. And then a couple days later, William got my phone number from a friend and he would text me. Me and William started hanging out. And then a few months went by and I had got pregnant with my oldest child, Isabella. And my dad, how was he? He was funny. Excited to have a kid. Couldn't wait to have you. William loved Isabella when I had her. He stood at the window where the nurses bathed her for 2 hours until they were done with her because she cried the whole time, and he was really upset that she was crying. He would get mad when they would come back in the room to take her to get shots or anything. So he was in love with Isabella. She was a big daddy's girl. He started taking her fishing at, like, I think it was like 2 or 3, and riding 4-wheelers and dirt bikes with her all the time. He had a great relationship with her. I had 3 kids with William. We had 2 boys and a girl. Our kids loved William. Like, he did no wrong. He was more of just like an outdoor person. He loved when it was summer and he could take the kids and play with them and take them to places. He liked to fish. Loved to fish. So do you guys. I'm not a big fisher person. Yeah, I liked him a lot because he just made it really fun. I actually left the house when I found out at 8:30 in the morning, and I didn't tell my children that William passed until 4. It was very hard to tell my kids. My daughter took it really bad.
Among the things that we recovered from William's body were jewelry, cash, and what we believed to be bags of narcotics. The presence of these 3 things to me means this was not likely a robbery. Eliminating the motive for this as robbery, we're left with a personal grudge type situation where somebody was only interested in killing him, not necessarily robbing him. Or could have been involved in this because of drugs. As we looked a little closer, we noticed that the gunshot wound to his leg had a large sooty ring around it, which is indicative of a close-up gunshot wound.
Seeing gunshot wounds so close in range kind of tells us either it was personal or someone was very, very close to him when this happened. Somebody wanted him dead.
As a homicide detective, once the first responders get on the scene and determine that something's out of the ordinary, we get called. So at this point, we took samples of the blood inside the truck.
The DNA sampling from the inside of the vehicle indicated that there had been another person inside. When we found the presence of the other person's DNA inside the vehicle, it made us wonder who that person was and what they might have to do with the situation.
Additionally, we do know we have a handgun on scene. We have a shell casing, and presumably we have a bullet still in his leg. these three pieces of evidence might be the most crucial, because at least now we could be able to determine if that gun was in fact the gun that killed Mr. Rios, and if that bullet was in fact the bullet that was used in the gun that killed Mr. Rios.
With all the unknowns that are still going on, this is treated as a homicide until we can prove otherwise. We went door to door. We found out that nobody heard any gunshots at all. So our in-person canvas gave us nothing. We left the scene with no witnesses, no video, one casing, one gun, and the knowledge that nothing had been taken from Rios' body.
After the officers, detectives, and myself were done with the scene and the body, he was then loaded up for the transportation to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's office.
What becomes very important at this point is we want to get the DNA sample of the blood sent off to the laboratory for testing. What we want to determine is just Mr. Rios' DNA on this handgun, is somebody else's DNA on this handgun. And we want to get the shell casing and gun sent off to the laboratory for analysis.
Youngstown has a crime lab, but the actual analysis is not done in-house. Youngstown uses the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation for ballistics work, and the nearest satellite office is in Richfield, Ohio, which is about an hour away. Getting a trace on a gun, getting lab results back, these things don't happen overnight, so we were just picking away at all the things we could do. At this point, we have to speak with Williams next of kin and relative to find out what they knew about his whereabouts and what he's been involved in the recent past.
I told the cops about 3 months before he died. I came home from work one day, William was home, and Dave Perella was in the basement. William told me that they were childhood friends and they had no water. So William was trying to help him out with letting him use the shower. David Perella was supposed to stay only one night, and he ended up staying like a month. I noticed William starting to change after David being there. Before all this, William was always in the garage or out in the yard playing with the kids and the dog. And then when David started coming around, William just slowly started wanting to sleep all day, not wanting to get up and play with the kids. I grew up in Youngstown. I was here my whole life. Growing up as a kid was fun. It was safe. But as you get older, it got worse. Youngstown just is high crime now, and it's kind of worse and bad out there now.
We're just a typical Rust Belt city you'd find anywhere. Drugs hit a few years after the steel mills. So we had the same problems that most major cities in America have with crack cocaine, and eventually heroin and fentanyl. During the time that I worked homicide, I encountered a lot of people who had drug problems, who had been living in other people's basements. You can depend on it, working homicide, that we're going to see just this scenario played out over and over again.
David had a bad influence on William. When William started not coming out of the basement, I didn't know what him and Dave were doing in the basement at first. But then, as it got worse, I started thinking like that him and Dave were doing some type of drugs in the basement. That's when I said David had to go, and if William continued to hang out with David, that he couldn't be in the house either anymore. And William said I was crazy, but he ended up leaving that night. And then it all just went downhill from there.
So in addition to learning about our victim, we now wanted to learn about David Hadrola. We made several attempts to find and interview David Hadrola. However, David was kind of a slippery guy. We made several attempts to
locate him at the only address we had for him. When you have a possible suspect in a case and all you're trying to do is get a good interview with them, it is frustrating. You can't locate them.
At this point, the body has been sent for an autopsy, and now we're gonna have to wait on these results.
Forensic pathology is, in essence, writing the final chapters of an individual's storybook of their life. The body can be the biggest clue in determining what happened to that decedent. Name, William S. Rios. The body is that of a well-nourished, light-complected male appearing consistent with the reported age of 33 years. The body weight is 160 pounds and measures 67 inches in length. An apparent medium caliber, minimally deformed, gray metal colored projectile is recovered from the right lower leg. Finding the projectile in the lower leg is very important because it's evidentiary value. The projectile is photographed and submitted to the Cuyahoga County Regional Forensic Science Laboratory following the autopsy. So this is an evidence card for the retained projectile that was recovered from right lower leg, and we can see a mildly deformed projectile. In this area where the jacket has been removed, that's typically the area where you see a bunch of striations or land grooves on the projectile. And they can use that projectile and match up rifling marks, the little marks around the bullet that's produced, to make sure that that was the same gun, or it can rule out that that was the same gun that was used in firing the projectile that was recovered. I make an incision, I gently dissect until I can see the pathway of the bullet. There was a laceration in that femoral artery of the right leg of Mr. Rios. So it tore the blood vessel. Blood could freely escape. That's a life-threatening wound. Within minutes, you can lose a critical amount of blood. So I determined the cause of death for Mr. Rios to be a gunshot wound of his right leg. Associated injuries: 1/8-inch partially healed abrasion, left lower back / flank. After dissecting the gunshot wound of the leg for Mr. Rios, I was able to see there was a recent gunshot wound to one of his flanks and healing abrasions that would be consistent with recent injuries. The presence of healing gunshot wounds is alarming. You don't see that too often.
After seeing the old wound on his side and digging into Rios' medical records, I was able to determine that was from a previous assault a few weeks prior. Seeing that in his medical records was very interesting because it led me to, again, what happened? Did someone assault him again? Did someone find him again? What was this?
On the following day, Kelsey got back to us to let us know that our victim had been shot in the past. To our records, we found he had been shot while operating a motorcycle on the south side of Jamestown. The suspect in that case was David Headrow.
Was constantly running the streets. He didn't have a family, so I don't think he really cared if William ruined his family because he didn't have one. One night while I was actually getting ready for bed, I had received a phone call from a friend of mine. And she was explaining to me that Dave had seen William at a red light. And Dave shot him. I asked my friend why David would have shot William, and she said that they were actually in an argument and they had been fighting with each other the last month. When I went to the hospital and I talked to William got bullet holes were just leaking blood everywhere. I took William home from the hospital. I thought maybe him seeing the kids and being at home, he wouldn't want to leave. But the next day, William left. My kid watched William just walk out on his own, and I told him, you're choosing either being on the streets and doing drugs or the kids. And when he left, my kids were mad at him because he picked being out on the streets over them, and they were really upset about it.
Determining our victims, enemies, and who might have had a reason to shoot them was important. But it had been over 30 days since that shooting happened, so we did not go back to that scene and try to recover evidence. In the days following Rios' death, I made several trips over to his house where our person of interest had really lived. Talked to neighbors, just trying to get a chance to get face to face with him.
Unfortunately, Mr. Calderon was basically off the grid at this point, kind of leading us down the path of suspicion that why isn't this individual making himself available for questioning? Did he potentially have something to do with his death?
The answers we typically seek aren't always in plain sight. So I would say plain sight would be akin to looking at the decedent on the autopsy table. Toxicology. Specimens of blood, bile, urine, gastric contents, brain tissue, and liver tissue are submitted for toxicological analysis for the presence of illicit substances. The circumstances surrounding the death, as determined by the investigative and postmortem findings, indicate that the manner of death is to be determined by out-of-county coroner.
At that point, we did speak with pathologists, but we were nowhere near making any conclusions at this point. However, Kelsey, our coroner's investigator, is able to look at our victim's past medical history and give us an insight into things that we normally couldn't.
After continuing to dig in Rios' medical records, there was a history of mental health, including anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideations.
After William left, I was talking to the kids, and they started slowly saying like the stuff William was saying to them, like he had passed away, he had to be by their side. They would get really upset. So I told them it'll be alright, don't listen to him. It made me sad that I couldn't help him.
We learned that while Rios was being treated for his first gunshot wound, he had expressed in the hospital to staff that he had thoughts of hurting others.
So this is now leading us to, could this have potentially been a suicide?
But the fact that he had been involved in another shooting and the possible presence of another bullet was very important to us. Maybe there was still a bullet inside Rios' body from a previous shooting. That could lead us to the suspect in the case. It could change the difference between a homicide and a suicide. It could change the difference between both of those and an accident. The ballistics and DNA results from the Bureau of Criminal Investigation should put to rest the issues at hand.
Following the autopsy, Detective Lambert did call and inquired about any retained projectiles that may be present in Mr. Rios' body in relation to the healing gunshot wound. I had x-rays taken, but it doesn't happen in a short period of time. We need to be sure that there's a projectile or not, and go from there.
after him.
We learned Mr. Rios suffered from depression, anxiety, and had suicidal ideations. Now this gets us wondering, was this a suicide? Was this just an accident? We have to be very methodical in our collection of our evidence and our analyzation of the evidence so that we don't jump to the wrong conclusion.
Here's some of the remnants of what was his book bag. He had a different ID. He had some different badges with white powdery substance, phone, some Suboxone. So dealing with some addiction, trying to get off some substances. William was trying to get help and couldn't get off of it. I spoke to him and told him that I would help him and we could parent together, but he needed help before he could do any parenting. I don't really think anyone could help him at that time. William just had to help himself.
To be sure that there were no other retained projectiles from the healing gunshot wound for Mr. Rios, we checked the X-ray and we didn't see any other bullet present in Mr. Rios' body.
After we were able to talk to our pathologist, we were able to learn that the only bullet in Rios' body was the one from the most recent shooting. In the prior shooting case, Rios had received a perforating gunshot wound, which means that a bullet had entered and exited his body. It was frustrating. The presence of another gunshot wound, but not the bullet, does not help the investigation. But I was confident if we stayed the course, we'll get some kind of answer.
In regards to the toxicology report, there were a number of illicit substances that were detected. The toxicology report is absolutely needed for the manner of death. In the case of Mr. Rios, the presence of a gun and illicit drug use, which of course alters coordination, in addition to other physiologic effects. Those substances in themselves alter your thinking. And the way I look at it is that they are risk factors for an accident happening. Of course, we think about suicide in that situation as well.
It was November 3rd. William reached out to me. I had lost my mom November 2nd. It was the first time he reached out to me and said he was sorry. And he hoped me and my kids were okay. And that explained to me when he was here. And I asked William if he was going to come to the funeral. And he told me he would try. He did not show up for my mother's funeral. I think William, before all this stuff with David and drugs, he would have definitely showed up before the funeral.
Yeah.
And he would have definitely came to my mother's funeral. So I think he was just lost in his own world, doing some type of drugs and going through his own demons at the time. It was really scary. So that's when I started trying to convince him to go and get help and just to leave Youngstown altogether and just move away. And he wouldn't. He said he loved me and the kids, and that was the last conversation we had had.
Yeah.
In the following days, I did have an opportunity to speak by phone with Rios' brother. And this man told me that Rios had become paranoid over the last month since the original shooting with David Havrilla. And had taken to wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a gun most of the time.
We got additional information that Mr. Rios became increasingly paranoid about death threats. He was worried that somebody had an out for him. With these type of investigations, questions lead to more questions.
Towards the end, William told his family that he was going to die, that people were going to kill him, that it was either William was going to die or someone else was going to die. I believe David did have a hand in it.
toys in his mind, and he really needed to get help. But when Dave shot him the first time, then I knew something serious was going on. I'm not sure what kind of hold David had on William, but he was fighting with David. And his family would ask him, like, well, what can we do? And he was like, there's nothing no one could do to help. And that's why William said he was staying away on the streets.
We weren't sure what this was going to be, a homicide or something suicidal. So you could see the blood on the dashboard kind of bleeding into the passenger side. Some of the facial injuries here he may have sustained from the car accident. Moving down further with the photo.